So,
All right. So, like I said, I'm the director of the 7A program. 7A is an article in the law, the maintenance code of New York, where it's a program where buildings are appointed where a really bad building that it's considered to be specific criteria that I'm going to talk about a little bit later end up under the management of a 7A administrator. This happens in the court, so it has to be through a case. Usually these buildings end up in litigation. Now, how does a building end up in court? Well, it has to meet a specific criteria. These cases can be initiated by tenants and can also be initiated by HPD. When we get a referral for our building from different programs, the 7A program goes out and does an assessment of the building. We look at the conditions and we also talk to the tenants. The conditions have to be where the conditions are considered to be a threat to the life and health of the tenants. For example, lack of heat and hot water, or it could be where the landlord is absentee. He abandoned the building, no one is managing the building, no one is collecting rent, or also when other enforcement programs have not worked in the past, like AP that you're going to hear about from Soraya, or the building has been through litigations through a comprehensive case and still nothing has changed, then it ends up in our program. One thing that is important to note is that the tenants, 1/3 of the tenants need to support the 7A case. And that's something we do when we go out and talk to the tenants when we initiate that first intake. The tenants have to sign and agree that if a 7A is appointed, they have to now pay the rent to the 7A administrator and participate in what happens in the building afterwards. The same when the tenants initiate the case, 1/3 of the tenants have to be part of the case, and then we get notified, and we do something similar that when we initiate a case, we go out to the building, we do an inspection, we create a scope of work based on the conditions that we see in the building. And sometimes we support the case, sometimes we don't support the case, but at the end of the day, it is the judge that decides if the 7A administrator will get appointed or not. Sometimes during the trial, we can agree with the landlord and we enter into a consent order, which means that the landlord tells the court, I am willing to fix the building, I have the finances, and we all agree into a consent order and we monitor the building for X amount of time. It depends on the work. And if at the end of that time, the landlord does not comply with the consent order, then a 7A administrator gets appointed, or sometimes they do comply and a 7A doesn't get appointed. Now, if we win the case, which means that we get a 7A appointed, the court will choose the 7A administrator. We have a list of approved 7A administrator, and then they will start to manage the building. The owner still owns the building, the landlord, but he loses the right to collect rent. He cannot access the building, for example. He cannot make repairs. The building is now managed with the 7A administrator. The first thing that we do when a building enters into the program, we have a meeting with the tenants, the 7A administrator, and HPD, where everyone, we explain to all the tenants what happens now, right? Now they have to start paying rent to the 7A administrator. They probably will get new leases issued. They all have to be legal rent. Of course, we work with the HCR to establish a legal rent of the leases. And then after that, we start to do the process of a loan. The 7A administrator will procure a loan from the city most of the times, because these buildings, like I said, they are usually in really bad conditions. So the rent roll will not be enough to make the big repairs that this building needs. The rent roll will be enough for the daily maintenance of the building. The building should be self-sustaining in that sense. But the big repairs, the major, like replacing systems, new roof, and things like that, will be done through a loan that the 7A administrator procures from the city. And and they do the scope of work, they hire a contractor, and at the end of sometimes 8 months, 9 months, which the time that it takes for these buildings, they are in really good conditions. After that, they just, the 7A administrator manages the building until the program comes out of the building. How does that happen? It has to be also through the courts. Sometimes this can happen in the middle of construction. It can happen at any time. If a new landlord, let's say someone buys the building while it's in the program, or even the old landlord, they want to go back to court to try to take the building away. Again, at the end of the day, it's up to the judge to decide if the building goes back to the landlord or not. Sometimes we support the discharge, sometimes we don't. Again, every building is different. Right now we have around 26 buildings in the program. We have 7 buildings in Manhattan, 2 in the Bronx, and 17 buildings in Brooklyn. That's where most of our buildings are. And they all are at different stages of this process that I just told you about. Some buildings are new, some buildings have been in the program for years. So that's more or less the general, what I can tell you generally about the program.
I just want to jump in and reiterate what Melissa said, basically that it's not a change in ownership. So I think that's important for everyone to know. Also, just in general, HPD enforces the New York City Housing Maintenance Code, the New York State Multiple Dwelling Law. The 7A legislation is actually part of the New York State Real Property Actions and Proceedings Law. And as she mentioned, it's based on the appointment. The judge must appoint the 7A administrator. We bring these cases, and that's the other thing I wanted to point out. It's not a change in ownership. The owner still owns the building, but it's just they can't manage it. So the managing agent the 7A administrator steps into the shoes of the landlord and basically collects rents, does repairs, can take out a loan, manages the property. And the 7A program at HPD oversees and monitors the 7A administrator. And it is probably one of the strongest enforcement tools that we have. And it's really used for the most, conditions that are dangerous to life, health, and safety.
Okay, so I can move on to this AEP.
I know I didn't put my camera on, but okay, so I'm Soraya Ruiz, and I am the director of the AEP program. So every year in January, HPD designates 250 buildings, which are the ones more distressed, the multiple dwelling ones. These buildings are they're selected based on the number of Class B hazardous and Class C immediately hazardous violations, and also on the dollar value that have incurred in the building by work done by HPD. So we just received our buildings this year, and so what happens now, we give the landlords an opportunity in the first 4 months to try to fix all the violations, the B's and C's on the building, to meet the requirements, which are like 100% on heat violations, 80% on mold B, 100% on mold C, 80% on vermin, and 80% on other B's and C violations. And they have to pay all their dues in Department of Finance and all the charges they have, and have the building register up to date. So after these 4 months, if the conditions have not been corrected, HPD will conduct a roof to cellar inspection on the building, and they issue an AEP order, which lists the underlying conditions that needs to be fixed, which can include repairs or replace a major component on the building. So in addition to all of this, also, if the building is not discharged within the first 4 months, they get hit with fees, which are $500 per dwelling unit every 6 months, beginning on the date of the building-wide inspection. and a maximum fee of $1,000 per dwelling unit during the participation in the program. Also, they get $200 for any complaint inspection performed and $100 for each re-inspection to a certification of correction violations, where HPD finds that one or more violations have not been corrected. After the first 4 months, if the owner fails to comply that, HPD may hire a contractor and make the repairs at the owner's expense. And all this, the owners, if he fails to pay the bill, this also may result in a tax lien being placed against the property. So basically right now, we are working on posting all these notices to these buildings that came in the program, and we give them an opportunity to file for a dismissal request, which they have to pay $1,000. That gives them 3 re-inspections that we can do to try to correct all these violations.
I can jump in a little. Oh, do you want to continue?
No, that's it. Good.
So I just want to add about AEP. So it's basically, we just, as Soraya mentioned, we just ran our list of new buildings for 2024. This is the 17th year that the AEP program has been in effect. So it's been 17 years with various changes to the program. But basically this program is for the most distressed buildings in the city, and it's for buildings that are repeat users of our enforcement activity. So it's basically to get at buildings that have routine problems where a tenant might have a leak in their apartment, call 311, the landlord patches we write the violation, the landlord patches the roof, or our emergency repair program patches the roof to address the immediate hazard, but the owner doesn't make the long-term fix. So, and then a couple months later, right, in that case, a leak would happen again, the tenant would have to call 311 again, the landlord would either patch it again, HPD would patch it through emergency repair program. And we really wanted, 17 years ago, we wanted that cycle to end. And we wanted a program where that was happening, where we could address the underlying condition. The program is very fee heavy. So as Soraya mentioned, owners have a 4-month opportunity to correct a great number of violations. We have a bunch of information about the program on our website. But basically to get discharged, she mentioned 100% of heat and hot water, 100% of Class C mold violations, 80% Class B mold, 80% of vermin violations, and 80% of all other B and C violations, which is a really high threshold of violations to correct to get discharged. For owners that don't meet that criteria in the first 4 months of the program, they basically get an order to correct, which at that point, HPD is telling the owner now, in the example I gave, you can no longer patch your roof. You can't just fix that leak. You now have to replace your roof, or you have to point the exterior of your building, or you have to replace your heating plant. So it's really to get at buildings that have been high users of our enforcement activity. The fees, if the owner doesn't comply with the violation requirements, and if there's no compliance in the first 4 months, it's a $500 per dwelling unit fee that gets imposed, and it's billed by the Department of Finance and becomes a tax lien if not paid. And then 6 months from that date, if the owner is still not doing the right thing and compliance for discharge hasn't been met, there's a second $500 per dwelling unit fee. While the building's in the program, there's also complaint inspection fees. There's a $200 complaint inspection fee. So if a tenant calls 311 while the building's in AEP, again, post the 4-month period, and as a result of that inspection, we issue a Class B or C violation, there's a $200 complaint inspection fee. Again, the fees are supposed to be a deterrent to get landlords to do the right thing, to make the corrections. Just one other point about AEP, it's one unit. It's a little bit unique amongst our enforcement programs in that it teams up housing inspectors and construction project managers with community coordinators. So each team is responsible for a group of buildings. So tenants in buildings that are in AEP have an assigned coordinator who they can call. That coordinator's job is to make sure that tenants know about the building status in the program. And also the coordinator is also responsible for making sure that information about the program is also relayed to the landlord. So like I said, it's, we just ran our list. Everything was put on the website today for round 17. It's been 17 years. And, Soraya is the new director of the AEP program. And I would like to, I guess if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you so much. So we do have a few questions tonight. But before we start, I just want to thank you again, Leslie, Grace, and Soraya. So the goal of the program is to improve the housing conditions at the buildings by having HPD perform frequent inspections to monitor the corrections and violations, correct?
For AEP, the goal is to get at buildings that have high violation counts and that may have underlying conditions, right? This is the one opportunity. There's no other program within HPD an enforcement program that can tell the landlord you have to replace your roof, or you have to point the exterior of your building, or you have to replace all your plumbing. So this is the one program. And it's basically, that's why we have construction project managers working with the housing inspectors. So we could see if there's leaks and molds, we're looking at what the cause of all those are. And if it's systemic, if it's building wide, and then we issue the order. One other thing I just want to point out too, is that we can do the work. So in a case, the easiest example is a roof replacement. If we order the landlord to replace the roof, we'll give the landlord an opportunity to do that. If they don't do it, we can actually step in, hire a contractor, do the roof replacement, which are big jobs, and then bill the landlord for the cost. We also can go to litigation to get a judicial order to compel the owner to comply with our administrative order. But throughout this process, to get the underlying conditions corrected, we do have, there's usually regular inspections of the building.
Okay, got it. And since there was a few people who've been joining in, like while you guys were speaking, I want to know, can you just go over how are the buildings identified and put in either 7A program or AEP program?
So for AEP, the criteria is set forth in the rules. So it is for AEP, if a building is greater than or equal to 15 units. So for the larger buildings, they must have a ratio of B or C violations, 3 or more B or C violations per dwelling unit that were issued in the past 5 years. And they have to have emergency repair charges, either paid or unpaid, it doesn't matter, of $2,500 or more incurred in the last 5 years. So we want to get recent, we don't want to get a building that has no violations recently, but has old violations. We're looking for recent activity. For buildings that are between 3 and 15 units, we look for a ratio of 5 or more open B or C violations per dwelling unit, again, issued in the past 5 years, and either paid or unpaid charges of $5,000, again, incurred in the past 5 years. So that's basically the criteria. Now, some buildings that are excluded are buildings that are in the 7A program, right? Because you're not going to put, a 7A building is on a different path, right? They're getting a loan, they're doing, it's a separate path. Also, if HPD closed on a preservation loan in the past 2 years. So we don't want to get at buildings where there's already a path for compliance. We're looking at buildings where there needs to be enhanced enforcement.
And also,
but that's the criteria.
Okay. And then I think you just touched on it, but like the process of the building getting into the program, like how many violations does the building have to accumulate? So
that's what I just told you. With that criteria is basically entered. We have a data team at HPD that on January 31st, they basically run all of the data, the requirements for the program into the building, and it generates a list of 250 buildings.
Okay.
And on that day, so as Soraya mentioned, yesterday was January 31st. Yesterday afternoon, we got the official list. It was published on our website. So you could go to the HPD website. You'll see the list of round 17. We call it each year as a round. The list is published. We give notice to everyone. So this week and next week, owners, coordinators who are assigned to the buildings will be going out. They'll be posting the buildings to provide notice to the tenants that the building's in AEP. The building is flagged on HPD's website as being in the AEP program. It's also flagged with Department of Finance. So if an owner goes to look at his tax bill, they're going to see an AEP flag on it. When we issue an order to correct for AEP, we also file that with the county clerk's office. So it's notice to any future, if there's a loan, if there's a sale, it's notice to any future purchaser. And then during the next 2 weeks, right, well, actually during a little bit longer, but the coordinators who just got their buildings right yesterday afternoon, they'll be going to buildings, they'll be knocking on doors, they'll be giving flyers to the tenants in those buildings. For some of the bigger buildings, right, the smaller buildings, they'll knock on the tenant's door, explain the program. For the larger buildings, they'll usually schedule tenant meetings in the lobby of the building to give everyone an opportunity to, for their specific building, to raise questions about their building and the process of AEP.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. So I'm not going to get into Q&A because we have a lot of questions right now.
Sure.
So let's start with the first question is, are landlords required by law to have monthly extermination services?
So I don't have the law in front of me, but landlords are supposed to keep their buildings free from vermin. It's a violation that HPD writes. We will issue violations for rodents or vermin. For AEP, when there's an infestation in an AEP building, we will, just like the order to replace the roof, if the building has a vermin infestation or pest infestation, we will require a landlord to do integrated pest management, which is beyond just exterminating. So for buildings in AEP that require integrated pest management, we will reach out to, we'll order the owner to do IPM. And if they fail to, that's something we will do, which IPM, integrated pest management, it's beyond extermination and involves like making sure holes are properly sealed up for vermin that get through. There's a whole educational component about making sure that like tenants are, reminded of all the ways to keep pests like out of their apartment. So it's definitely a violation that we will write for, and we will, when there is an infestation issue, in order to do integrated pest management.
Okay, thank you. And you guys can follow along. I'm in the Q&A box.
Yeah, I'm looking.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question is from Cindy. It says, I live in a 420A building where the landlord claims the base service of gas. Rather than provided gas, he hooks into the tenant to provide hot water for the common areas. He has no meter, no hot water heater or boiler. We learned all this years into our occupancy. The HCR tells us to go to HPD. Our buildings have been hacked, to disconnect from the tenants, but have to set up again. Our building is rotting. We have leaks. This has been ongoing for years. How do I get HPD to document who provides the hot water for the common area? Wait, Grace, you're muted. Hold on. Wait, you're muted.
I mean, that's very specific to a certain address and building. So, I mean, I could always, if you provide the information, we could get back to the person or whoever asked the question.
Okay, no problem. So if you ask that question, just be sure to follow up. It says, are there any restrictions regarding types of buildings that are not eligible? Specifically, are buildings that are overseen by HPD eligible for this program? So buildings that are city owned aren't eligible for AEP, and there are exclusions like buildings that have, a preservation loan that closed in the last 2 years. Those are buildings that are excluded from AEP. Okay. The next question is about referring to the loans that were discussed. They said, are these zero or low interest loans?
For the 7A program, I'm assuming. So the 7A program, it's a loan to the administrator, but it is, I have to double check. It gets billed through the Department of Finance and becomes a lien against the property. So it's not a good thing. You don't want, a landlord does not want a 7A administrator dealing with his property or taking out a loan.
Mm-hmm. And this is like another follow-up by another attendee. It says, who will be taking out and responsible for the
So the person it's the administrator who takes out the loan from HPD, and it's capital money that the agency, so it's the administrator who takes out the loan, but it's a scope of work that's approved by the 7A program. So through the court. So during the court case, if we support a 7A building, right? And this is for buildings, I just want to clarify, we give loans for buildings where we support the program, the administrator being appointed. So if it's a building that's in really poor condition, conditions dangerous to life, health, and safety, a third of the tenants are agreeing to support the administrator and pay rent. Once the administrator gets appointed, they come to HPD. Actually, let me go back. During the court case, the 7A program will provide a scope of work to the court detailing what needs to get done in the building. And then when the administrator gets approved, they basically come to the 7A program who reviews the scope to make sure that we approved initially, to make sure there were no changes. And then we go through our budget office to get the administrator the money to do the work. Once we also monitor, when I say we, the 7A program, we monitor the work of the contractor hired by the administrator. And when the work is complete, we sign off on payment, and the money goes from the city to the administrator, and then we lien the property. So then we bill that money through Department of Finance, and like some of the AEP charges, if it's not paid, becomes a lien against the building. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to add about the loan. One of the criteria to discharge the building is the landlord, the old or the new one that wants to take the building back, has to enter into a payment agreement with the Department of Finance. They have to pay back that loan if you want your building back, basically.
Yes, that's a good point. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, so before an owner, if it's the old owner, the new owner, whoever it is that wants the 7A administrative discharged, they have to go to court, come up with their plan to like manage the building. And one of the requirements is that they pay whatever we paid through the 7A administrator program, they have to pay the city back.
So I think the next question kind of relates to that. It says, is the landlord forced to sell the building to another owner if they're unable to put the building back into business?
So the landlord's not forced to sell the building. However, once the administrator is appointed, I mean, the existing landlord can petition the court to get the 7A administrator discharged. However, we do see more often than not, we usually see the landlord sell it to somebody else, who then the new owner has to petition the court to get the administrator removed.
Okay, it says, so HPD does several types of orders that can be used in housing court to force landlords to make repairs. What are the different types of orders HPD can issue the landlord?
So the orders that we're talking about here are different from the court orders. They're administrative orders. So basically they are like very similar to if HPD goes to a building and the building is uninhabitable, right? We would issue an order to repair / a vacate order. AEP issues an AEP order to correct, which is for the underlying conditions. We also have an underlying conditions program, which deals with buildings that have many mold and leak violations, and they issue orders for owners to address an underlying condition of mold and water leaks. So they're basically administrative orders. They're issued against the property, mailed to the owner, and then there's a compliance required. If the landlord doesn't comply with our administrative order, we can, like an AEP, we're allowed to go ahead and do the work required by the order. In some cases then, similar to AEP2, if we don't move forward and do the work ourselves, we can go to court to get a court order to enforce the administrative order.
Okay. It says, can you explain the process of how landlords report work orders and how they alert HPD on existing building violations? Is there a specific portal, or do they have a specific person from HPD that they report to?
Could you just, I'm sorry, can you, how landlords report work orders? So
Yeah.
basically, HPD issues violations to landlords. We encourage all landlords to register with good, up-to-date contact information. Our goal is to always get, even from the very beginning with a maintenance complaint, is always to get the landlord to correct the condition. So a complaint, from the minute a complaint comes in, a housing maintenance complaint comes into 311, we have an owner notification process. Code enforcement has an owner notification process. We let the owner know what the complaint is. If the inspector inspects the building, we don't tell landlords when we're coming. If the inspector goes to the building and issues a violation will get mailed to the owner. Owners have an opportunity by law to correct the violation, and then they could certify correction of the violation to the city. For violations that are immediately hazardous and would generate an emergency repair, for example, a cascading water leak, right, where the ceiling's falling, or a collapsing ceiling, a violation would be issued, but then we'd also call the landlord to let them know we issued a violation, and if they're going to fix it. If a landlord says in that phone call, I know about it, I'm going to fix it, HPD will then call the tenant to verify whether or not it has been fixed. And if the tenant can't verify that it's been corrected, we would send out a contractor to fix it. With AEP, specific to AEP, there, like I said, I mentioned the coordinator. They are in contact with both tenants and landlords, because the goal is to get conditions corrected, preferably by the landlord and done the right way. So the coordinator is responsible for getting information to the landlord and the tenant. On regular violations, though, landlords have an opportunity to certify correction, which then, our code enforcement office will send notice to the tenant, letting them know that we received a certification of correction, and then they would follow up and check if that has been corrected.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The next question is in Spanish, so I'm going to have our interpreter interpret it for us. So, once again, if you are English speaking, please hit the globe at the bottom of your computer to hear the question. Daniel, are you ready? Okay.
I can translate quickly.
Did y'all hear it?
No, I didn't hear it.
Okay.
Melissa, did you hear it? I didn't hear it.
I'll read. Well,
Okay.
well, I can let's repeat it.
Melissa, can you read it?
Okay, the question is, if my building is in the AEP, should I still call 311 to report?
Yes.
The building
So
is.
so you should definitely call 311. All 311 complaints for AEP buildings are sent directly to the AEP program. So AEP, like I said, they have inspectors and construction project managers and community coordinators. So any 311 complaint for AEP buildings will goes through the 311 system directly to the AEP program.
Okay, thank you. The next question is that how does this says, hello, very informative. How does this apply to NYCHA?
It doesn't. NYCHA is totally separate. This is for privately owned buildings.
It says HPD building complaints can be made to 301 or by calling landlord.
So we encourage all tenants for any housing maintenance issue, to contact their landlord first. And if the landlord is not responsive to the complaint, then to report it to 311.
Okay. The comment left by, I'm not gonna say your full name, but your last name, Richardson. Can you please contact Palante so we can address that problem that you're having? I just don't want to read your personal information on this call at this time. So you can give Palante a call at 212-491-2541 so we can further assist you. Once again, that's the last name, Richardson. In 2019, my building was placed on the AEP list, and HPD also sued my landlord for lying about lead certification. Why doesn't HPD notify tenants and ensure the landlord notifies us?
So we notify tenants of if we're going to proceed with work. So if we're going to do emergency repair work in an apartment, we would notify tenants. Or if we are doing system replacement work, we would notify tenants of the system replacement work. There are certain requirements about like making sure landlords provide notice of being in the AEP program, but we also do that. So there are notification requirements. There is no notification. We don't, anytime we go to court, unless it's for, we don't notify tenants of every court case. I mean, it's really like something that we would notify them if we're doing work and we need access.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
if your building, so that person, if their building is still an AEP and they still have like more specific questions relating to their, like to the violation, to their apartment, or to like the building being an AEP, they should definitely contact us.
Okay. And do you guys have a contact number?
Yeah, Soraya, and we could provide our contact information. That's not a problem.
Add it and stuff. Okay. The next question is about, I guess, the buildings in the program. They're asking, is there a list we can reference as renters to ensure we don't visit or rent from one of these buildings?
So the list is on HPD's website, but a great tool is HPD Online. So you could punch in the address on our website of any property, and you'll see like violations, you'll see emergency repairs, you'll see if the building is in the 7A program or if the building is in the AEP program. There's a tremendous amount of information on our website, but on HPD Online, you could actually look up very specific information related to a building.
Mm-hmm. And also, we will provide everybody with the link to the HPD website that shows the building as well.
Mm-hmm.
For follow-up. Also, the next question is about the tenants having a roach issue and they need help resolving the situation. So first,
That was
Mhm.
related to the person who you asked to contact you directly, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
First,
Yeah.
please contact. We can help you do a service complaint for that issue. Contact Palante. Does AEP have a list to access? Okay, this is about the buildings again. So yes, we will be providing the list to all the tenants.
And just so you know, it's not, in addition to, you could look at the list. We have 17 years of lists, right? Each year we publish a list and it's all on our website. But for the most up-to-date information, you should check HPD Online for a specific address.
Okay, it says, I'm currently in eviction proceeding for withholding rent and complaints made on behalf of resulting violations. So this person asking this question is very specific, so we would need more information about that. It's from the anonymous attendee. If you wrote a question about an eviction proceeding, Just provide us some more information on that, because it wasn't specific enough. I'm going through these questions. It says, okay, I have a small question. I know if a building doesn't have any heat, it's a violation. What about excessive heat? Tenants are running their ACs, losing sleep and suffering, find comfort. Can you speak on this?
You know, I think we would we've seen occasionally where we've seen excessive heat where the heat's on in the summer. I don't really have that much information about what code enforcement does if they see it in the winter. But if you get me the details on the property then and the complaint or the address or, you know, whoever made the complaint, we could discuss specifics, or I could get your question directly in contact with code enforcement, who could probably be best answering your question.
Okay. It says, although there are only 250 that are selected, there are likely thousands more in need. How does HPD prioritize who gets selected every year?
So the priority is, hold on, let me just say. It's ranked by the paid or unpaid ERP charges in the last 5 years. So of the buildings that meet the criteria, the top 250 with the most emergency repair charges are the ones that are selected. Okay. In a nutshell. But again, it doesn't mean that like there's no, this isn't the only, I mean, we were asked to talk about these two programs, right? But it doesn't mean that like these are the only two programs that exist. So, I mean, if you have questions about your specific building, we encourage tenants to call 311, make complaints if violations are issued, reach out to groups like Palante who can help you. And if it's, you know, a number of issues in the building, organized tenants are really, you know, powerful and, you know, they could get stuff moving.
Okay. The next question is about from a nicer tenant. I guess they're having issues with the roof in the building and it's unstable. And they says, how does a structural engineer come in and work with nice and HPD to repair? But before we fall into demolition, but gonna lose our home. So basically, I guess like how does HPD assist?
So I mean, if it's a NYCHA building, NYCHA is we'd have to make the complaint directly to NYCHA. For a non-NYCHA building, if there's any concerns about like structural issues or anything structural, again, the complaint to 311 and it would be a Department of Buildings issue.
Okay. The next question is, who is the administrator?
So administrators of the 7A buildings, it's a number of people. We have a list of approved administrators who have experience in housing. They have to fill out a whole package with HPD. It goes through a sponsor review and they get approved. And it's maintained by, we maintain the list. So anytime a judge wants to appoint administrator, they will ask us for the list of approved 7A administrators. There are people who are experienced housing, who deal with housing issues.
Ms. Dunn, can you rephrase that question you wrote, please? Because I'm having a hard time understanding it. Ms. Dunn, can you rewrite that question, please? It says, is the AEP coordinator a new position?
No, the AEP coordinator has been around for 17 years.
Okay. It says, any success.
If for that person, if there's questions, I would direct that to Soraya and she could look up the specifics of the building.
Yeah.
I think the next question is great. It says, any success stories with buildings in 7A or AEP on average? How many years is a building either in either of these programs?
So in some cases, we have buildings that are in AEP for, you know, many years. Sometimes there's extensive work. Sometimes there's ownership changes. Sometimes there is access issues between the landlord and tenant, and it's that last vermin violation that needs to get out. It really depends. We have lots of success stories over the years for both 7A and AEP. I'm trying to think of, we have a building on Troutman in Brooklyn that we're rehabbing through the 7A program. We have 410 West 46th Street, which was a landlord on the major landlord list, who the tenants were very successful in advocating for themselves. They were organized. We supported the 7A. We supported the 7A for that building. A 7A was appointed, and we just got approval to spend the money to rehab the building. It's on West 46th Street. There was a lot of media about it, and we are scheduling a bid walkthrough to have vendors look at the building to see, like, to start the rehab process. AEP buildings, when the landlord, meets compliance and, the building, is violation, pretty much the violations are corrected and systems are corrected. Those are another great outcome. So we do have success stories. I just don't have any on like I said, we just got our new list yesterday, so the program's been pretty busy. But I don't know if Soraya or Melissa, if you have any specific building you want to talk about.
I just, not a specific building, but I just want to add the 7A, unlike AP, when the building gets discharged, that's how you measure that it was successful, because it means that the landlord complied. In 7A, I think when we think about the life of the tenants and how they live, as soon as a 7A is appointed, things start to change for them, right? The building starts to get maintained. There's a loan. There's a big construction work going on. They're going to get, probably most of them get new kitchens, new bathrooms. So that, if you ask the tenants, that is successful. Of course, do we want the building to leave the program and end up with a responsible landlord as soon as possible? Of course. But just because they're still in the program doesn't mean that it's not successful for the tenants. They're definitely living in the better conditions now. And the idea is to discharge the building to a landlord that will maintain those conditions and keep the upkeep of the building.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. So the next question, it says, is it against HPD guidelines to not have a super on the premises if there are 6 or 7 stories and at least 50 tenants?
So the New York City Housing Maintenance Code specifies when janitorial services are required and when a janitor needs to be required. I actually don't have the exact requirements with me right now. I don't have my housing maintenance code with me. However, if janitorial services aren't being provided, it's a violation that code enforcement would write. The bigger issue, though, is usually if there is no janitor, there's garbage in the property, at the property, and we also would write violations for the specific like garbage and debris, right? We've gone into basements where it was filled with garbage, and through our emergency repair program, we've actually cleaned up basements to remove all the garbage and debris. We don't get into everything with us is with the inside of the property, and maybe the exterior of the building, not the public sidewalk.
Okay. It says, can you use Acris? Is there a list to know which buildings have issues so that you know what to look for when you're looking for an apartment?
HPD Online is your best friend for that. Like I said, you could look up very specific information, who the owner is, what the violations, types of violations, if we've ever spent any kind of emergency housing, if there was ever a finding of tenant harassment. There's a tremendous amount of information on HPD Online, which is you could get to through our website.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is HPD required to upgrade stoves, tubs, and sinks when apartment is vacant or remodeling done? Yeah.
So we would do that or as part of a 7A rehab, not part of any program, and we wouldn't require it.
Okay, it says, This is by an anonymous attendee. Can a building management or property owner lease commercial space if there is no CFO?
So anything related to like the use of commercial space at the building would be within Department of Buildings jurisdiction. And you, like any 311 complaint regarding like illegal use or occupancy would be a Department of Buildings issue.
Okay. So the next question is about a person who has issues in her
That,
apartment.
yeah, I think that person should just contact us directly. They could contact
Yeah.
me directly and or Soraya. And even if the building's not in AEP, we could direct them to the right place.
Correct.
Or if they could go through you and then you just send it to us, that's fine too.
No problem. Okay. And the next question is also a very personal issue, so please definitely either contact HPD or contact Palante so we can further assist you. Grace, you see the last question by Ms. Dunn. Are you able to answer that?
So tenants who have, I mean, I guess maybe that could be directed to us directly and we could try to look at the specifics. HPD doesn't get into any kind of like rental, like non-payment issues. We're concerned about conditions in the apartment.
Can I have HPD's number so I can put it in the chat?
Sure. Soraya, are you able to give your number?
212-863-8262.
Wait, say one 212-8.
863-8262. That's the main number. And my number is 212-863-8681.
Okay, give me 1 second. I'm putting that in the chat. Okay, so I'll put both those numbers in the chat for everyone who's still here with us. I see somebody has their hand raised, but I would suggest you put the question you have in the Q&A. But I believe that was the last question that we have as of right now. So if there isn't any more questions, I will begin with the final remarks. So I would like to thank our presenters, Melissa, Grace, and Soraya of HPD. I want to thank for providing us such valuable resources and information on this